The auction block smelled like damp wood and shame. It stood in the center of Coldwater's town square, beneath a sky the color of dirty dishwater. Around it, men gathered in clusters. Ranchers with dust on their boots, merchants with coin purses tucked beneath their vests, drifters with nowhere else to be. They talked in low voices, spat tobacco into the dirt, eyed the platform like it was livestock they weren't sure that was worth the price. And on that platform stood a girl. She was small. Too small for 14, maybe 15. Hard to tell with the way hunger carved shadows under her cheekbones. Her dress was a faded calico thing, torn at the hem, patched at the elbows. Her hair hung in dark tangles around her face, unwashed, unkempt. Her hands were folded in front of her, trembling slightly, though she tried to still them. The auctioneer stood beside her, a portly man with a red face and a voice like a bullwhip. He'd been droning on for 5 minutes now, listing her qualities with the detached efficiency of someone selling a plough. "Strong back," he said, "good with laundry, can cook, clean, mend, quiet, won't cause trouble." No one raised a hand. The auctioneer's smile thinned. He adjusted his hat, cleared his throat, and tried again. "She's young, got years of work in her, won't eat much. Hell, feed her scraps and she'll be grateful." Still nothing. The girl's eyes darted across the crowd, searching for something. Kindness, maybe, or at least indifference. What she found was worse. Disinterest, disgust. A few men whispered to each other, shaking their heads. One laughed low and mean. "Look at her," someone muttered. "Skin and bones, probably sick." "Probably cursed," another added. The auctioneer's jaw tightened. He needed this sale. The county had paid him to clear out the orphans and indigents, and this girl was the last one left. If no one took her, she'd end up in a workhouse, or worse, back on the streets. He lowered the price. $10, he said. $10, and she's yours. Silence. 5. Nothing. The girl's breath hitched, her hands clenched into fists, nails digging into her palms. She bit down on her lip hard enough to draw blood, but she didn't make a sound. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction. But then, from somewhere deep in her chest, a sob broke loose. It was small at first, a hiccup, a gasp, but once it started, she couldn't stop it. Her shoulders shook. Tears spilled down her cheeks, hot and shameful and unstoppable. "No one wants me," she whispered. It wasn't loud, barely a breath, but in the stillness of that square it carried. "No one wants me." The auctioneer looked away, embarrassed. A few men shifted on their feet. One spat again and turned to leave, and then from the back of the crowd came the sound of boots on dirt. Slow, steady, deliberate. The crowd parted. A man stepped forward. He was tall, taller than most, with broad shoulders and a long black coat that swept behind him like a shadow. His hat was pulled low over his eyes, but beneath the brim you could see a jaw carved from stone, a mouth set in a hard line. His boots were polished, his clothes clean. He moved like someone who didn't need to hurry because the world would wait for him. He stopped at the base of the platform and looked up at the girl. She stared back, frozen. He didn't smile, didn't speak. Just studied her with eyes the color of storm clouds, grey, unreadable, sharp. Then he reached into his coat and pulled out a leather wallet. "How much?" he asked. His voice was low, rough, like gravel underfoot. The auctioneer blinked. I said $5, but... The man pulled out a bill. Crisp, clean, more than 5. 50, he said. The square went silent. The auctioneer's eyes went wide. 50, sir, take it. The man's tone left no room for argument. He handed over the bill, then turned and walked back toward the edge of the square without another word. The girl stood there, trembling, unsure if she should follow. The auctioneer stuffed the money into his coat and gestured impatiently. "Go on, girl, you're his now." She stumbled down from the platform, legs weak, heart pounding. She hurried after the man, bare feet kicking up dust, eyes wide and wet. He didn't look back. She followed him to the edge of town where a horse stood waiting. A massive black stallion, sleek and powerful. The man swung up into the saddle with effortless grace, then held out a hand. She hesitated. "You coming or not?" he asked, voice flat. She took his hand. He pulled her up behind him, and she wrapped her arms around his waist, holding on tight as the horse surged forward. They rode in silence. The girl didn't dare speak, didn't dare ask where they were going, or why he'd bought her, or what he wanted. She just held on and tried not to cry again. After an hour, they reached a ranch. It was bigger than anything she'd ever seen. Fences stretched for miles, cattle dotted the hills like scattered stones. The main house was 2 stories, whitewashed and solid, with a wide porch and smoke curling from the chimney. The man dismounted and helped her down. She stood there, small and lost, staring up at the house like it was a castle. He glanced at her, then nodded toward the door. "You'll sleep in the back room," he said. "There's a bed, a basin, some clothes. You'll eat with the hands at dawn and dusk. You work, you eat. You don't work, you don't eat. Understood?" She nodded quickly. "Yes, sir." He studied her a moment longer, then turned and walked toward the barn. She stood there, alone in the dirt, and for the first time in years, she wasn't cold. The girl woke before dawn. She'd spent the night curled on the narrow cot in the back room, wrapped in a blanket that smelled like wood smoke and leather. It was the softest thing she'd slept on in months. She hadn't meant to cry, but the relief had been too much. She'd cried quietly, face buried in the pillow, until exhaustion pulled her under. Now, in the grey light before sunrise, she dressed in the clothes left for her. A simple cotton dress, sturdy boots, a shawl. They were too big, but they were clean. She rolled up the sleeves and tied the shawl tight, then stepped outside. The ranch was already awake. Men moved through the yard, tending horses, hauling water, sharpening tools. They were rough-looking, weathered by sun and work, but they moved with purpose. No one glanced her way. She spotted the man from yesterday near the barn. He was brushing down the black stallion, movements slow and methodical. She approached cautiously, boots crunching on gravel. "Sir," she said, voice small. He didn't turn. "Name's Garrett." "Mr. Garrett, Just Garrett?" She swallowed. "Garrett, I wanted to thank you for yesterday." He didn't respond, just kept brushing. "I'll work hard," she added quickly. "I promise. I can clean, cook, mend. You know how to handle chickens." She blinked. "Chickens? Coop's behind the house. Needs cleaning. Eggs need collecting. You do that, then come to the cookhouse for breakfast." "Yes, sir. Yes, Garrett." He finally glanced at her. His expression was unreadable. "You got a name?" "Lily," she said. Lily Marsh. He nodded once, then went back to his horse. She hurried toward the coop. The work was hard, but she didn't mind. She cleaned the coop, collected eggs, hauled water, scrubbed pots. The ranch hands ignored her mostly, though a few nodded in passing. One, an older man named Dawson, handed her a biscuit without a word. She ate it like it was gold. By the third day, she'd settled into a rhythm. Wake before dawn, work until dusk, sleep like the dead. Garrett barely spoke to her, but he didn't need to. She watched him, the way he moved, the way he commanded respect without raising his voice, the way he treated his horse better than most men treated their wives. He was kind in his own way. But the others noticed. "Why'd he buy her?" one of the hands muttered over dinner. "Charity," another replied. "Man's got a soft spot he don't show. Or he's lonely." "Don't talk about the boss like that." "I'm just saying, well, don't." Lily kept her head down and ate in silence. On the fifth night, Garrett called her into the main house. She stood in the doorway, uncertain. The house was warm, lit by oil lamps. A fire crackled in the hearth. Garrett sat at a wooden table, papers spread before him. "Sit," he said. She sat. He didn't look up. "You read?" "A little." "Right?" "Some." He slid a piece of paper toward her. "Practice." She stared at it. "Practice?" "You're going to learn," he said. "Can't have you ignorant your whole life." Her throat tightened. "Why?" He finally met her eyes. "Because you deserve better than what you've had." She didn't know what to say, so she just nodded. 2 weeks later, a rider came. He arrived at dusk, dusty and travel-worn. Lily was in the yard hanging laundry when she heard the hoofbeats. She glanced up and saw Garrett step onto the porch, arms crossed. The rider dismounted. He was a sheriff, badge glinting in the fading light. "Garrett," the sheriff said. "Ned." "Got a question for you." "Ask it." The sheriff gestured toward Lily. "That the girl from Coldwater?" Garrett's jaw tightened. "What of it?" "Town's talking, saying you paid $50 for her." "I did." "Why?" "None of your concern." The sheriff stepped closer, voice dropping. "People think it's strange, Garrett. Rich man like you, buying a girl off an auction block. Looks bad." "People can think what they want. I'm not here to judge. Just be careful. Folks talk. Talk turns to suspicion." Garrett's eyes narrowed. "You think I bought her for something indecent?" "I think," the sheriff said slowly, "that you should be smart about this." Garrett's hand moved to the gun at his hip. "Not a threat. Just a reminder." "She stays," he said. End of discussion. The sheriff held his gaze a moment, then nodded. "All right, but if trouble comes knocking, don't say I didn't warn you." He mounted his horse and rode off. Lily stood frozen, laundry basket in her arms, heart pounding. Garrett turned and saw her watching. For a moment, something flickered in his eyes. Regret, maybe, or worry. "Get inside," he said quietly. She obeyed, but as she lay in bed that night, she couldn't stop thinking about the sheriff's words. "Looks bad." And she wondered, for the first time, if kindness could be a curse. The men came 3 nights later. Lily heard them before she saw them. The low rumble of hoofbeats, the creak of saddle leather, the murmur of voices. She was in her room, half asleep, when the sounds pulled her awake. She slipped out of bed and crept to the window. Outside in the moonlight she saw them. 6 riders, maybe 7, silhouetted against the silver-blue darkness. They sat on their horses just beyond the fence line, still and watchful, like wolves circling prey. Her breath caught. One of them leaned forward in his saddle, and even from a distance she recognized the shape of a rifle. She bolted from the room, bare feet slapping on wood, and found Garrett already on the porch. He stood in the shadows, coat on, gun belt strapped, face carved from stone. "Get back inside," he said without looking at her. "They're here for me," she whispered. "Get inside." She hesitated, then obeyed, slipping behind the door frame but staying close enough to see. One of the riders nudged his horse forward. He was older, thick-shouldered, with a scar running down the side of his face. He stopped just inside the gate and tipped his hat in mock courtesy. "Evening, Garrett," he said. "Briggs." The name was said like a curse. Briggs grinned. "Heard you picked up a stray?" "Heard wrong." Now, don't play dumb. Whole town's talking. You bought a girl off the auction block. Pretty bold move." Garrett's hand rested on his gun. "She's under my employ, that's all." "Is that so?" Briggs glanced back at his men, then returned his gaze to Garrett. "See, thing is, there's rules about this sort of thing. You can't just buy a person and keep 'em locked up. It looks like something it ain't. She's free to leave any time. Then bring her out here. Let her tell us that herself." Garrett didn't move. Briggs's smile faded. "You hiding something, Garrett?" "I'm protecting someone. There's a difference." "From who?" "From you." The words hung in the air, sharp and cold. Briggs's hand drifted toward his rifle. "Careful, Garrett. You're outnumbered." "I'm aware." "Then be smart. Hand her over and we'll be on our way." "Over my dead body." Briggs sighed, long and theatrical. "All right then." He raised his hand. The men behind him raised their rifles, and in that moment Lily stepped out onto the porch. "Wait." Every eye turned to her. She stood in her nightdress, shawl wrapped around her shoulders, trembling but upright. Her voice was small, but it carried. "I'll go," she said. "No," Garrett said sharply. "I'll go," she repeated louder, "if it stops this." Briggs chuckled. "See? Girl's got sense." Garrett stepped in front of her, blocking her from view. "She's not going anywhere." "Then you're making a mistake." "Wouldn't be the first time." Briggs's expression darkened. "Last chance, Garrett." Garrett's hand closed around his gun. "Come and take her." For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then Briggs's hand dropped, and gunfire split the night. The first shot hit the porch railing, splintering wood. Garrett shoved Lily back into the house and drew his gun in one fluid motion, firing twice before ducking behind a post. Lily scrambled across the floor, heart hammering, ears ringing. She could hear shouting, the crack of rifles, the thunder of hooves. Garrett moved like a shadow, calm, precise, lethal. He fired again, and one of the riders toppled from his horse, screaming. "Get to the cellar," Garrett shouted. "I can't." "Go!" She crawled toward the back of the house, glass shattering above her as a bullet punched through the window. She found the cellar door, yanked it open, and tumbled down the stairs into darkness. Above, the gunfire continued. She crouched in the corner, hands over her ears, tears streaming, and prayed. It lasted minutes, maybe hours. She couldn't tell. Eventually the shooting stopped. Silence fell, thick and suffocating. She stayed in the cellar, shaking until she heard footsteps. "Lily!" Garrett's voice. She climbed the stairs on unsteady legs and found him standing in the wreckage of the house. His coat was torn, blood staining his sleeve, but he was alive. Outside, the riders were gone, fled or dead, she didn't know. Garrett looked at her, and for the first time, she saw something she hadn't seen before. Fear, not for himself, for her. "You all right?" he asked. She nodded, unable to speak. He holstered his gun and walked toward her, slow and steady. When he reached her, he placed a hand on her shoulder, just for a moment. "You're safe," he said quietly. But his eyes told a different story, for now. The next morning, Garrett left. He didn't tell her where he was going, only that he'd return by nightfall. He saddled his black stallion, checked his rifle, and rode off into the pale dawn without a word. Lily stood on the porch and watched him disappear over the hill. She should have felt safe. The ranch was quiet. The hands went about their work as usual, and no one mentioned the night before. It was as if the gunfire, the blood, the fear, none of it had happened. But she couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. She spent the day doing what she always did, cleaned the coop, collected eggs, mended a torn shirt. But her hands shook, and her mind wandered, replaying the sound of rifles, the look in Garrett's eyes. "You're safe." Was she? By late afternoon, she found herself standing in front of Garrett's house. She hadn't meant to go inside. It felt wrong, like crossing a line. But the door was unlocked, and curiosity pulled her forward. The interior was simple: a table, a few chairs, a hearth. No photographs, no decorations. Just the bare bones of a life lived in solitude. She moved through the room slowly, taking it in. In the bedroom, she found a trunk at the foot of the bed. It was old, scratched, locked, with a small brass clasp. She shouldn't open it. She knew that. But something made her kneel down and lift the lid. Inside, she found clothes, papers, a leather-bound journal, and a photograph. It was small, faded, tucked into the corner of the trunk. A woman stared back at her from the image, young, dark-haired, smiling. She wore a simple dress, and in her arms was a child, a little girl. Lily's breath caught. She turned the photograph over. On the back, in faded ink, Margaret and Eliza. 1871. She stared at the names, heart pounding. Who were they? She set the photograph down carefully and picked up the journal. The first few pages were empty. Then halfway through she found an entry. June 14th, 1872. Margaret is gone. Fever took her in 3 days. I couldn't save her. Eliza cries every night. I don't know how to comfort her. I don't know how to do this alone. Lily's eyes blurred. She flipped ahead. August 2nd, 1872. Eliza is gone too, drowned in the creek. I wasn't there. I was working. I wasn't there. Lily's hands trembled. I should have been there. She closed the journal and pressed it to her chest, tears streaming. He lost them. That was why he'd bought her, not out of pity, not out of charity, out of grief. She put everything back carefully, closed the trunk, and left the house. When Garrett returned that evening, she was waiting on the porch. He dismounted slowly, tie and exhaustion etched into his face. He glanced at her, then nodded toward the door. "Food's inside," he said. "I found your journal," she said quietly. He froze. "I'm sorry," she added quickly. "I didn't mean to pry, It's fine." His voice was flat, but his jaw was tight. She stood. "Garrett, Don't. I'm not her, Lily said softly. He looked at her then, really looked at her, and something cracked in his expression. I know, he said. Silence. Then he sat down on the porch step, shoulders sagging. Lily sat beside him. They didn't speak, just sat there as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. After a long while, Garrett spoke. I couldn't save them, he said. My wife, my daughter. I had everything. Money, land, power, and I couldn't save them. Lily said nothing, just listened. When I saw you on that platform, he continued, I saw her, Eliza, the way she used to look at me when she was scared, and I thought, maybe I could do it right this time. He turned to her. But you're not her, and I'm not trying to replace her. I didn't want you to feel the way I did. Alone. Lily's throat tightened. You're not alone, she whispered. He exhaled slowly, something heavy lifting from his chest. Neither are you, he said. And for the first time since the auction block, Lily smiled. The riders came back. This time there were more of them. Briggs had gathered a posse, men from town, men with grudges, men who didn't like the idea of a rich rancher defying the rules. They arrived at dawn, surrounding the ranch, rifles raised. Garrett stood on the porch, gun at his side. Lily stood beside him. This is your last chance, Garrett, Briggs shouted from the gate. Hand her over, or we burn it all down. Garrett's jaw tightened. Lily stepped forward. No more, she said. Lily, no more, she repeated louder. She turned to Briggs. I'll go, but not because you're making me, because I choose to. Briggs frowned. What? I'm free, she said. Garrett gave me that, and I'm choosing to stay. She looked back at Garrett. If you'll have me. He stared at her, something unspoken passing between them. Then he nodded. Always! Briggs spat into the dirt. You think that changes anything? It changes everything, Garrett said, and he raised his rifle. But before he could fire, a voice rang out from behind the posse. Lower your weapons! The sheriff, Ned, rode forward, badge gleaming. This is over, he said. Briggs turned. Ned, what the hell? She's free. She's staying by choice. You got no claim here. But, no buts. Ned's voice was steel. You want to take this further, you'll answer to me. Briggs glared at Garrett, then at Lily. Then he spat again and rode off, his men following. Years later, when the ranch was thriving and Lily had learned to read and write and run the books, she would sit on that same porch and remember the day she cried on the auction block. She would remember the man who bought her, not as property, but as proof that kindness still existed. Garrett never remarried, never tried to replace what he'd lost. But he wasn't alone anymore. Neither was she. And on warm evenings when the sun dipped low and the world turned gold, they would sit together in the quiet. Two people who'd been broken by the world and mended by each other. The ranch stretched out before them, endless and free. And Lily, for the first time in her life, felt wanted.